ngā mana i ngā reo, i ngā tapu, i ngā karangatanga maha, koutou ngā tini hoa, ngā tini whanaunga, nei rā te mihi manahu ki a koutou katoa. Nau mai, haere mai, nau mai, piki mai, nau mai, hono mai. Hono mai ke o koutou kāinga maha, ke o koutou wāhi mahi, puta no te motu. E mihi ana ki a koutou mo tō koutou whai wāhi i tēnei kaupapa, i tēnei kōrero e pāna ki tēnei o mātou kaupapa o Active Whakapapa. No reire, e mihi atu ana ki a koutou mo tō wā, mo tō aroha, mo tō awhi. E mihi ana ki a koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā hui mai tātou katoa. E taimā e whakarongo ana, e taimā e mātakitaki mai nei, ko mai Tipene tōku ingoa. He uri tēnei no ngā iwi whānui o te tai tokerau, te raro a Ngāpuhi hoki, te taho toku māma no manaia, te taho toku pāpa no panguru. No reira, e mihi atu ana ki a koutou, ko au ki tētahi o ngā kaimahi o Healthy Families Waitākere, ko taku tūranga, ko te rautaki Māori. No reira, e tipu aki au ki te uru o tāmaki, noho ana au ki te uru o tāmaki, mahi ana au ki te uru o tāmaki, ngā kau nui ana mo te uru o tāmaki. E mihi atu ana ki a koutou. Kia ora and welcome everybody. My name is Mike Tipene. I'm the rautaki Māori for Healthy Families Waitākere, here in the beautiful West of Auckland. And just wanted to acknowledge you all and thank you for your time today, your presence, your participation. Nau mai, kuhu mai, ki tēnei kōrero, e mihi atu ana ki a koutou. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora. Kia ora koutou. My name is Giuliana. I also work with Healthy Families Waitākere as a systems innovator. I whakapapa both to Ngāti Porou on the East Coast and Tūhourangi back home in Rotorua, where my whānau still reside. Really excited to be a part of this presentation and share this kaupapa with you all today to talk about the work that Healthy Families Waitākere have been doing across our community for the last few months. So I'll start to share my screen, and so you let me know if that's our presentation is going to come up and look right. And we'll get into it.
Kapai looks good.
Cool. Okay, so we're going to spend the next hour walking you through one of our main kaupapa that has been close to both Mike and I sort of hearts and heads for the past few months of Active Whakapapa, so a hīkoi of discovery in West Auckland. And so we've had a little bit of a background about both who us are, but we acknowledge that it's so cool to have so many of you here today, both from Healthy Families across the motu, but also acknowledging that there may be some hearing about Healthy Families and our mahi for the first time today. So just a little bit of a short intro as to what we do. Healthy Families New Zealand, we're a national program funded by Health New Zealand. We have 11 locations across Aotearoa. With Healthy Families Waitākere being one of those sites, with Sport Waitākere here in Henderson as our contract host in our West Auckland community. Healthy Families takes a systems change approach to the prevention of chronic disease. So we look upstream at root causes and how we can enable people in our community to be their own agents to lead healthier, active and more fulfilling lives. We work in partnership with community for a collaborative approach to wellbeing. We strongly believe that it's through collective impact that we can make meaningful changes. Mā te kotahitanga e whai kaha ai tātou. In unity, that's where we have strength. We concentrate our energy where people live, learn, work and play.
Ka wai. Tēnā koutou. So the kaupapa, Active Whakapapa, is basically an experience where we connect the participant with whakapapa. Could easily be interpreted as genealogy, but we also think about history. We think about Mana Whenua and the stories of Mana Whenua. So before we get into the kaupapa, we're going to play a short sound file so that you can sort of get a gist of what we've created and how we're going about it.
Mai te kore, ki te pō, ki te whai au, ki te ao mārama. Tihe mauri ora. We are stroking, caressing the spine of the land. We are massaging the wicked back of the land with our sore but ever-loving feet. How? She loves it. Squirming, the land wiggles in delight. We love her. And I love you. As you are standing here in the middle of the field, I want you to take a moment to center yourself. Ground yourself as we are going to go deep and connect to the roots of this whenua. No need to rush. Just feel the pulse of mine. Papatua nuku. Take a slow 360 degrees view around you. Look up. Look down. Appreciate where you are now. This unique moment of time where our today's journey starts. This is the center when time is still and dynamic simultaneously. This is where the past and present meet. This is where they create space for the vision board of the future, moments to come. Look around one more time and ask yourself the question. From everything you see now, what will you take with you in the future? What will you leave behind? Are you in control of changes that might happen in the future? Or are those changes inevitable? Ranginui and I are the creators of everything in this lifetime. I'm excited, as soon enough you'll meet my biodiverse nature whānau. Perhaps you'll recognise yourself or your whānau in them. You will also learn about Māori history and settlements that took place here. I hope that this shared experience will bring you closer to one another. Nevertheless, I would lie if I didn't tell you that before meeting the rest of the whānau, I would like you to make this first contact with me.
Ka pai. So that was just a short snippet of the Active Whakapapa experience in Te Atatū Orangi Hina. So the kaupapa Active Whakapapa looks to tell the stories of the whenua according to Mana Whenua, according to local iwi, also according to local Māori who have born and raised their whānau within those certain areas and regional spaces. It looks to identify significant sites to Māori across various locations. At the moment, we have isolated, or our priority focus is on Waitākere or West Auckland. So this particular sound file that you've listened to is specific to Orangi Hina in Te Atatū. Those of you that remember Footrot Flats in Te Atatū, it's that site there. So these are site specific, so they tell the kōrero or the history and the kōrero tuku iho, or those stories that have been passed down through generations of that particular site and according to Mana Whenua. The site also encourage, this kōrero encourage you to be physically present at that space, at that park. Many of the parks are green spaces that are council managed, Auckland Council managed. So this is also about us using those physical parks and recreational facilities, getting more Māori and more people in general physically active. And there's no better way to connect to history but by actually physically being present in the history. So it's not just about hearing about a place, it's about hearing about it, learning about it while you walk, traverse through and on the whenua itself. So we learn through pūrākau. Pūrākau for those of you that may not be familiar with the term pūrākau, my koro told me that pūrākau is the pū, or the pūtake means the source. Rākau is literally a tree. So he taught me that pūrākau comes from this idea, if trees could speak, what would they tell you? And so the pūrākau is exactly that. It's the stories of old, the stories where a lot of our real precious information and knowledge is passed down. And so a lot of our information has been storified by our tupuna, by our ancestors, for very good reason. Because if you tell a tamariki or a tamaiti a story that is big and audacious and exciting, they'll remember it forever. I don't know a single person that has heard the story of Maui and the sun and has forgotten about it, or has forgotten the essence of the story. So although a lot of these stories may seem like they have been sort of glorified, a lot of them have purposely, because that's what tamariki remember, that's what they engage in. So it's about telling those pūrākau, but also about unpacking the history, unpacking the learnings of that particular whenua, again, according to Mana Whenua. Okay. So our collaboration partners. We were honoured and privileged to collaborate with Te Kaurau Āmaki. That's the local iwi or Mana Whenua within the Waitākere region. And this was critical and crucial to the Active Whakapapa project or kaupapa itself. Without Te Kaurau Āmaki on board, there is no Active Whakapapa. And if I had $1 million tomorrow to create these stories without the consent and buy-in of Mana Whenua, I would have nothing. So that's how critical Te Kaurau Āmaki have been to this project. To say that creating a relationship with Mana Whenua in general is easy would be a lie. So there was always a real need to engage with Te Kaurau Āmaki, because they were the story holders, they were the knowledge holders of this rohe. They knew all the pūrākau. Many of the pūrākau that we tell in Active Whakapapa haven't been documented in any form. So these kōrero still only sit in the hearts and the minds of their old people and those that were privileged enough to be given or passed down these kōrero. So we are hugely privileged to be able, or to be seen as kaitiaki of these precious taonga that they have allowed us to share, to disseminate throughout the Waitākere community. Our second partner group is Te Pou Theatre. They basically are those of you that know them, are a group of Māori performing artists, stage writers, story writers, narrators, that can both operate in Te Reo Māori and Te Reo Pākehā, so both in English medium and Te Reo Māori. And finally, Papaya Stories, they brought technology to the game. So we now had kōrero, we had content that we wanted to share. However, we also wanted to look at an authentic way that we could share it, that was similar to how our old people would share it, and that was orally. So Māori are naturally an oral people. We pass information down through, mostly through stories, through whai kōrero, but also can be seen on our carvings, our tukutuku panel, panels, our whakairo within our meeting homes and houses. And so Papaya Stories enabled us to deliver the Active Whakapapa kōrero time and time again on a consistent basis. And so Papaya Stories basically merged old with the new. We merge old stories with new technology to find a happy medium to be able to disseminate our kōrero. So, kai here, where are our locations? So we have activated Orangi Hina, and that's in Te Atatu Peninsula. Beautiful spot. And that particular kōrero talks about flora, fauna of that particular location, how those flora and fauna serviced Māori or sustained Māori in their time. It also speaks about our community champions that we've identified. And I won't give away too much because I'd like to hope that at some stage you'll all participate or have the opportunity to participate. But it also talks about Te Kawerau Āmaki and how in particular the awa fau was used, or the wai fau was used by Te Kawerau Āmaki and other tribes, how Te Kawerau Āmaki also settled in the Orangi Hina or Te Atatu area. It gives an explanation to the word or the ingoa Orangi Hina. It also explains Te Atatu, and also identifies many significant pou or rangatira that are associated to that area as well, that have a connection back to Te Kawerau Āmaki. That particular walk is bilingual. We designed that walk as a pilot to see if it would work, if it would, or a prototype I should say, and what the uptake or interest would be amongst community. The sheer interest and desire to participate in Orangi Hina Te Atatu Active Whakapapa drove us to also then develop Henderson Park. Henderson Park talks about the Panuku stream and how that got its name. And again, I won't give away too much. It also talks about the environment. It talks about rongoa Māori. It also talks about kauri dieback. This particular hīkoi in Henderson Park was also developed in Te Reo Māori. So there's two options for Henderson Park. There's Te Reo Pākehā or English medium, and also Te Reo Māori for our Māori medium learners and those that just choose or understand Te Reo Māori and would like to participate in Te Reo Māori. And then our final is Te Whau, or the Whau pathway in particular. And this one hasn't yet been completed. It is underway as we speak. So this one will talk about the traditional names of Te Kawerau Āmaki along, that they recognise along the Whau. There's about 15 in general. And then with these 15 names, there's a little bit of a story behind each. And so we will share those, we look to share those with Te Hapuri Whānui or Waitākere as well. So the wider community of Waitākere. One of the things we learned from Te Atatu, or maybe was an oversight, is that we didn't service our Māori speaking communities. So therefore every Active Whakapapa designed moving forward will also have a Reo Māori version as well.
Cool. So kia aha, why should we care really about engaging in the whenua in this particular way? And the main purpose of this slide really is to show that both Western and Māori models of health acknowledge the benefits of being physically active. You know, we've got the Ministry of Health and World Health Organizations who issue specific guidelines on physical activity levels. We know the stats about insufficient activity and the links to chronic disease, as well as research supporting the wider benefits to overall well-being from time in nature and outdoor spaces, and social determinants of health such as connecting to others and to community and to our genealogy, our own identity. And these are all acknowledged in Te Ao Māori too, but there is a deeper understanding of this level of impact on well-being in Te Ao Māori, as it is the long-standing connection with the whenua that sustains our health, our belonging and a sense of identity. Mason Jury's well-referenced model of health, Te Whare Tapa Whā, shows whenua as the foundation of hauora, upon which all four pillars stand. Adding yet another layer to this is the known impact on hauora, which Māori draw from their connection to whakapapa. Their connection to the whenua and their ancestors is what strengthens them to go forwards into the future. So from that explanation and our kind of understanding of what we've heard of the kaupapa so far, we could probably get on board with the impact on well-being Active Whakapapa could bring to our community or anyone who experiences it. However, what really took Active Whakapapa maybe from like a cool thing to do to an opportunity for systemic change was when we started to see alignment with conversations coming from the Ministry of Education. So this was a kōrero which started back in 2019, proposing a reset to the national framework for student learning across NZQA standards. In particular has been the introduction of the Aotearoa New Zealand Histories curriculum, where they talk of the importance for learners in our konga to understand our history, our local history, and we've heard Chris Hipkins make statements along the lines of how we, through knowing our history, move forwards together. Stronger when we understand the paths of our ancestors and what they walked to bring us to where we are today. The ministry has been working collaboratively to develop a New Zealand history update, which came into effect at the beginning of this year. In this reset, they have also acknowledged that there is a strong need to uplift and teach mātauranga Māori with authenticity, and that the current education system has underperformed our Māori learners and whānau for a long time. So as Healthy Families is all about a strengths-based approach to systems change, we've spent some time mapping that system as an education setting as we look to identify what holds an unhealthy system in place and what factors are preventing some, but especially Māori learners, to thrive in educational settings. We could spend some time unpacking that and discussing these systemic issues today, but potentially on a slightly more uplifting note, I'd like to walk you through our theory of change for how Active Whakapapa fits into the opportunity the Aotearoa New Zealand Histories curriculum has created for systemic change in our community. So let's first frame the challenge that is presented to us. There is a need to deliver for schools and educational settings to deliver on the curriculum changes issued by the Ministry of Education. We acknowledge the stress, the time pressures, the need for resources and the need for support that this creates for teachers in an already strained learning environment. And we highlight the current state of inequity. Mainstream schools are not necessarily bicultural learning environments. There is an innate bias towards Western learning content and teaching practices. Not some, but all, but we can probably agree that there is more bias towards one view than the other. As well as there's also the need to uplift the identities of Māori learners in a system which has historically underperformed them and their whānau. So if that's the current state, then let's look to what the vision could be. The whakatauki he waka eke noa, we're all in this waka or boat together, has been used a lot amongst talk of the curriculum changes. So what could we dream could be on the horizon that we paddle towards? What is our vision or most ideal educational setting? It would be an educational setting with strong reciprocal relationships between iwi and local schools, where schools are truly bicultural, or if not multicultural, learning environments where curriculum is taught with te ao Māori, is taught well, and is taught authentically. We vision this as a system where all learners emerge with a strong sense of self, their identity, and belief in their voice and sense of agency as they enter New Zealand society. It's a system where iwi narratives are shared and protected as taonga and live on in the hearts and minds of learners as they go through and navigate society. So if that's our vision, how might we start to get there? And we'll walk you through with how Active Whakapapa might sit in that space. So if we increase teacher access to te reo Māori, to Māori history, to pūrākau and waiata, and also guide and inform how they might meet these new Ministry of Education recommendations by enabling teachers to experience Active Whakapapa. If we collaborate with teachers and other educators to design exemplar teaching resources as to how they might fulfill these lessons plans on the recommendations. If we start to encourage schools to feed back to iwi and to whānau about what they do with the learnings and the stories that are shared, and start to create the ideas of koha, of giving back, of transparency and the relationships that schools seek to hold with iwi and whānau, then we'd anticipate we'd start to shift teacher mindsets on why there is a need to deliver on the curriculum changes, shift teacher practices on how they might go about doing this. We'd start to increase their understanding on how they might form mutual, genuine relationships with iwi and what reciprocal relationships look like. We'd start to increase teacher collaboration to create and share their teaching processes and insights as they try and test teaching strategies within their own schools and rōpū. And we can also assume that we'd start to enhance their own well-being through their direct participation in active whakapapa as the kaupapa, and through the connection to te taiao, the sense of identity, and being more physically active that they would go through themselves. This would lead to increases in teacher competence and confidence to fulfill the requirements of the Aotearoa New Zealand Histories curriculum. And we know the strong connection that lies between increased teacher wellbeing and how that affects learner wellbeing. So the relationship would go hand in hand to create an overall better learning environment, effective on wellbeing. And amongst teachers, learners, and school communities will raise awareness and increase their curiosity of their local whenua and local history. But I'd say even more that we'd go as far as saying we'd actually uplift the value and the perceived importance of these local spaces that the local whenua, that local history unlocks for all individuals. Which we'd all then anticipate would lead us closer towards that vision of what a more ideal, more fulfilling educational system look like. And again, you could ask the question, how might we know when we are there? This could be a process of months to years or a long time, but what could some of the indicators be that we are shifting the system to better serve Māori outcomes in an educational setting? And we could be looking for things like increased engagement of all learners, but particularly Māori learners in schools. They all emerge with a stronger sense of their identity and their whakapapa. We could be looking at measures or statistics such as increase in attendance percentages, decreases in truancy, which are definitely all matters and statistics that the Ministry of Education has their eye on addressing. They acknowledge the need to address that, but how or why is still a question. We could see increases in academic achievement, increase in education completion. We could even see an increase in Māori entry into the educational profession to continue the cycle of a system that is fulfilling for all. And of course, we would still continue to see that iwi narratives and iwi history, ancestral knowledge lives on, it is not lost, and in those traditional forms of storytelling and oral, not just always documented in a textbook. Okay, so this, having taken all that with us, let's get back to the kaupapa. After a series of small pilots with Active Whakapapa, we saw a great opportunity to scale and increase access to Active Whakapapa in June of this year. We partnered with Time Unlimited, who are a kaupapa Māori tourism business, to apply for the Reactivate Tamaki local funding. The intentions behind this grant issued by Auckland Council were essentially to mobilise more community members, especially after the impact of the COVID-19 lockdowns of 2021 up in Tamaki, and especially to increase the use of local spaces, community places, etc. We were successful in this funding grant, which we were really pleased by, which saw us achieve a series of activations of Active Whakapapa in West Auckland across June, and I'll go more into depth about these activations shortly. The funding also meant we were able to purchase our own set of 100 headsets to be able to deliver these hīkoi long term, funding for further sound and site development. Also, we were able to unlock funding for professional comms and marketing strategies to give Active Whakapapa some branding, and a comms and marketing team which worked in conjunction with our own amazing Healthy Families communications team, Zilla and Grace, to really increase the visibility of Active Whakapapa amongst our community. And you'll see here a picture, a few examples of some of the amazing marketing imaging they were able to put together, the boosts on social media platforms like Facebook, A3 newspaper cutouts, what else we had, radio adverts and things too. It really took Active Whakapapa from the place of word of mouth and something known by Sport Waitākere and Healthy Families to being well known and well heard of amongst West Auckland, which is really cool. Some of which you see examples in this slide here. The other bit which was really great about the funding is that we were able to secure a koha from our proposal of budgeting of a koha of a significant amount to be able to go back to Te Kaurua Maki in actual recognition for the gifting of their narratives to the community and what that would mean and what we could do with that knowledge. And also, just before I go on, I think one other part that I do want to touch on of our application process was that we appealed out to local schools for expression of interest in what Active Whakapapa would involve and if it's something they would be interested in or could see value in. And we were overwhelmed by the amount of responses and letter of support from schools, from principals that we received in return, all attesting to their need, their perceived benefit of their rangatahi being able to participate in something like Active Whakapapa, which gave us again some good initial insights as to how we started to test how Active Whakapapa might sit in the educational system and to serve our learners. So once we'd heard we got the green light for funding, this is a little bit about what we did. So overall, we're able to share Active Whakapapa with about 900 people in West Auckland over 18 different activations. 16 of these were with local school groups and 4 events were open to the community bookings. We first reached back out to the schools who contributed to our application process with acknowledging their letters of support, and we were booked out pretty much within the first week. So for over a month's worth of activations, the appetite for schools could not have been greater, which was really cool to see and to be able to offer that back to our community as well. We were able to work through schools from primary right the way through to some college students, and the funding also meant that we were able to take care of some of the other barriers that usually mean a lot of school groups, especially in West Auckland, miss out. So things like taking care of transport, buses to and from locations, food, other costs, and just general barriers. We were able to take care of that because of this funding. And as you can see, there's just a picture which speaks 1,000 words of how the events across June and July really ran amongst our school groups, which was really, really cool, privilege to be a part of, really. And as I said, so picture speaks 1,000 words, and this slide here really just unpacks some of the insights and the feedback that we got from both the tamariki and their teachers from their experiences of Active Whakapapa when they got to go on these hīkoi. From some of the surveying we did, amongst both the kids and the teachers, they were able to share multiple examples of not just what they'd enjoyed or how much they'd enjoyed the day or being out of school to learn things, but they were also able to share a lot of the examples about local history and what they'd picked up on from the kōrero and from the narratives from participating in the hīkoi, which we took as good evidence that this method is a really effective way to share and participate in learning local histories in a school environment through a Māori lens. And I'll hand over to you.
Ka pai. So I get to do some talking. Yeah, Giuliana just took 2 of my slides, but hey, pai tēnā, we'll roll on, we'll carry on. So yes, I did do some work in this kaupapa, and yeah, so what we're basically going to talk about now is the progress to date. What have we done? Where are we at the moment? What are we currently doing? So of recent, we have made engagements with a number of our local kāhui ako, which are our cluster schools that come together basically to support each other. One of these kāhui in particular is the West Auckland bilingual kāhui that has membership of bilingual units from primary all the way through to high school. And so what we're doing is we're engaging with them particularly around the local histories curriculum, looking to provide access to Active Whakapapa initially to the kaiako or the teachers to help them develop how and what they're going to teach over the next up and coming years in relation to localized curriculum or the history curriculum. One of the big areas we know that is of need is that currently our teachers, our kaiako, don't have access to local history. Well, local Māori history anyway, I should say. And so that's a big issue, because how are they meant to teach something they don't actually have or know? So Active Whakapapa, in this sense, becomes the conduit for information to be disseminated to our kura, to our kaiako. We also know that there's roughly 87 schools across Waitākere that are all wanting to engage with Mana Whenua, which is at the moment one person. And so we also know that that's an unrealistic task. So again, Active Whakapapa potentially becomes the conduit to that relationship. If it's the information and the content around localized history, Active Whakapapa can provide that. It also means for Mana Whenua, they don't have to have 87 relationships. They can potentially just have the one, and we can potentially service those 87 schools, being a regional organization that has more capacity than Mana Whenua. So there's a big learning in that in itself, is that when we engaged in the Active Whakapapa kaupapa, we took Active Whakapapa to Mana Whenua as an offering. We saw value in it. We saw value both from our side and also from Mana Whenua. And we knew there was value for Mana Whenua because we understood what their aspirations were for their iwi. Some of their aspirations were to disseminate their history throughout Waitākere. We also know they had a lack of capacity to do that. And so they were always behind the 8 ball. So Active Whakapapa, in one hand, we were asking for assistance, and on the other hand, we were also showing our support and how we were willing and able to support Mana Whenua. So this in itself was we went to Mana Whenua with something in our hands. We didn't go with empty hands asking for something. And that's pretty critical to know and to understand, is that any engagement with Mana Whenua, and I'm not just talking about Te Kawerau Āmaki, I'm talking about in general. A lot of our Mana Whenua don't have huge capacity. So it's always good to take something to them rather than go to them and ask for something first. So Active Whakapapa, we are conscious about reciprocity all the time. What does it mean for Mana Whenua? What is the give back to Mana Whenua? What do they get out of it? And this is all before what do we get out of it. So the things we have been able to do in relation to reciprocity is reports back to Mana Whenua of what we've been able to do so far, who we've been able to do it with, what have been the outcomes, what have we done, or how have we used their taonga, how have we used the information that they have given us, and what was the outcome. So those are reports that are going back. Financially, there's also been reciprocity. As you might remember, I spoke about the partners that we engaged in this kaupapa. So it was always important that if anyone was making money from this kaupapa, it had to be Mana Whenua. I never felt it was right for us to be making money off someone else's taonga. And so reciprocity was always huge for us. And I encourage that for everyone that's working with Mana Whenua. Always think about what you can give back. Updates, regular updates, feedback about how things are going. All of these things build really, really strong relationships. We've also engaged with our Healthy Active Learning regional team. So those of you that know what Healthy Active Learning is or don't, Healthy Active Learning is an initiative or a collaborative initiative between Health New Zealand, Ministry of Education and Sport New Zealand. And it looks to provide more support for our schools to engage in a more well-being or a well-rounded approach to well-being within the education system, in particular physical activity or physical education. So we have each regional sports trust, and there's 4 across the Auckland region, has a healthy learning, active learning contract. And so they all go into their schools and work, taking more of a holistic approach to physical activity and giving them opportunities to develop their tools, also to develop the ways they engage with their tamariki around educating them in physical activity. So to take more of a, I suppose, that their whare tapawha approach, rather than physical activity is just about basketball and rugby. So there's a whole lot more that to unpack, and that's what the Healthy Active Learning approaches. We delivered or took the regional team on an Active Whakapapa experience, and they were able to then go away and develop other ways they are able to take learnings or new ideas into their schools from the Active Whakapapa experience. Other community interests, Kāinga Ora. We have recently run a session with the Kāinga Ora National Placemaking Team that are responsible for exactly that, placemaking. We're in talks at the moment with Unitec in Point Chev to develop an Active Whakapapa specific to the Unitec site. So anyone that knows the Unitec site knows there's a lot of history there to unpack, to be told. And so Active Whakapapa, we're looking to engage that Unitec space to restore the mauri of that whenua. And also Te Wānau o Aotearoa. We're also in early engagements with them to provide access to not only the kaiako, but also all of the students in the tertiary education, going through tertiary education pathways there. We are currently prototyping teaching resources, or developing at least, alongside Healthy Active Learning, and also a number of other organizations that have reached out to collaborate in some sense. So digital learning partners, blended learning is one in particular that is looking to take the digital online space a little bit further in our schools. And so we're currently in talks with them as well. Also building more contacts with the Ministry of Education. We know through not only the experiences that we've had, but also the feedback that we constantly get from our schools, in particular our teachers, that this needs to be on the Ministry of Education's radar, and there's potential opportunity to collaborate in some formal fashion, but we are definitely always willing to have those kinds of conversations. The Koanga Festival is a festival that's run every year during Koanga, which is around sort of the spring phase, sorry. And Te Pou Theatre run a whole month of celebrating New Zealand story writers, in particular Māori story writers, actors, and so they run a month-long festival. Active Whakapapa featured in this year's Koanga Festival and was run, there was 2 sessions, and that was the launch, the official launch of our Henderson Active Whakapapa site. And again, our third site, the Faux Pathway, is currently underway as we speak. So, nō reira, that's our presentation. E mihi ana kia koutou, mo tō koutou wā, if whai wāhi nei, I tō koutou, your patience. We do hope you enjoyed or take something away from today. Yeah, mena he pātai tau, pata mai te chat, o tira kōrero mai. So yeah, if you've got any questions, please fire them away. We'll do our best to answer them in the best fashion we can. Nō reira, e mihi atu ana kia koutou. Before we officially wrap up, I just want to close this particular space with a karakia before we wrap up the whole event. Nō reira, kei nui tātou. Kia tātou katoa, te ata whai o tō tātou ariki a hiu karaiti, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga, ki te wairua tapu, ake, āmene. Kia ora tātou, if you have any questions, please fire them away.
Ka pai, we have one from Nikki Peneti Tōhemara. She says, main kaupapa whānau, he pātai. Was there a mix of English and Māori medium schools? And if there was a mix, was the feedback different, same or similar?
We have, in that particular month, unfortunately, the timing was really, we were pushed for timing. So we weren't able to get a lot of our, in particular, our kura kaupapa through just purely because of timing, but also because of a number of our kura out West Auckland weren't actually back at school at full capacity either. So although we reached out, it wasn't uptaken for various reasons. So we, to answer that question, we haven't really tested in a kura kaupapa as such, but we have had rumaki units or rumaki reo come through, yeah, with huge, with great feedback.
Ka pai. We also have another one from Pauline Bishop. She says, I work in ECE. How can we get our early childhood centres to become more involved?
That in terms of that, thank you for your question, Pauline. Do you mean in terms of having access to something like Active Whakapapa, or a level just as a part of the creation process as well?
Pauline would like to, yeah, there you go.
So I'm Pākehā, and I just want to say congratulations on this awesome kaupapa. But we're asking our students to engage in the local iwi and to contact them. And so I hear what you're saying about Mana Whenua, and that actually has been my experience when I was a teacher myself. And I think this is a great opportunity, but I don't want to send all my students off to Mana Whenua. But if they could be funneled into this kaupapa, that would support their journey and also their ability to connect their early childhood centre with the Mana Whenua.
I think that is all part of it, and exactly like as much as we say that Active Whakapapa sits as a kaupapa and it is an entity as itself that people can go and experience and do, the process of that collaboration and design in terms of how you take learnings from local iwi and history and what that looks like in terms of putting it into a practice, that's a process, that's a concept itself that can be transformed in ECE, early childhood care settings, right across to tertiary. And those are the sorts of conversations and collaboration that we're also trying to use behind the scenes for educators to take something like Active Whakapapa, not necessarily go through it, but the process of how you learn, how you engage, what you do with it after, who you feed it back to, could be right across the board in terms of the education sector. And we just be a vehicle of that conversation and what other community partners would be useful to strengthen that amongst, be it tertiary, be it early childcare settings as well.
It would be awesome. I actually am employed at Unitec, Te Wānanga, Te Whare Wānanga o Aotearoa, or Waiaraka rather, and I'm very happy to be there, and I know the stories of the land here about Waiaraka, and I hoped that the stories from where my students are could be shared with the tamariki and the whānau in those areas as well. That was my thinking. So very exciting what you're doing. Kia ora.
Thank you.
If we have any other questions, would you like to unmute and share your camera and put them to Giuliana and Mike?
Kei te pai? Kei te kōrero?
Ai.
Whakarongo, mātou?
Kia ora.
Kia ora, o tēnā koe. Karihe pātai, engari he mihi ki a kōrua, mō tō mahi rangatira, kārawe. Engari he mahi he mihi ki a koe te whanaunga, no Carol Smith tōku ingoa, no te uri o te Rarawa ki Roma Marae ki Ahipara. Tēnā koe. Ko au he kaitiaki I roto I te waka o te wānanga o Aotearoa ki te kaupapa o home-based learning. He imera mai koe Giuliana I te ata nei, nā te mea e hariko ahau ki te hara mai ki te tutaki I a koe mo te kōrero o kaupapa. Ai, no reira, he mihi maioha, he mihi poto ki a kōrua, engari tēnō rawe tō mahi. He mihi, kia ora.
Kia ora whai.
Kia ora whānau, tēnei te mihi ki a kōrua, tēnā tātou katoa, mean mahi anō, just mindful of the learning that happens in the struggle, and am interested to know if you could name maybe one of the biggest challenges that you've had in building the foundations of this and getting it out there to the ao. What would that be?
For me, I think the biggest struggle was definitely their Mana Whenua partnership. So this is actually a partnership. It's not just we're not collaborating. There's a whole lot of trust, and so with that, that was actually the most, not only the most critical, but that was also the, excuse me, the lengthiest part of this whole project. So to, to establish that authentic relationship took probably about 2 years. And because we were, obviously we weren't the only thing that was on Mana Whenua's radar. And anytime people go to Mana Whenua, they feel they're taking them the most important thing in the world. And we were one of those most important things in the world that we thought we were the most important thing. So again, that 2-year conversation or 2-year build to relationship was very Māori nei. We had to do it in a Māori way. And that also meant that the barriers of sort of Western employment sometimes were a little bit, I suppose, in the way sometimes, where we needed to deliver results and we needed reports back on what's happening, how has this progressed. However, that 2 years wasn't in vain. Once the relationship was there and it was strong and we mutually agreed that there was benefit both ways, from that point on, everything went really, really quickly. So once, for example, the timeline, 2 years to build that relationship, once we had the relationship and I suppose we were qualified to be tika and pono, then after that, Active Whakapapa only took 3 months to actually develop and run. So it was 2 years in the making, but only 3 months of actual, I suppose, mahi, if that makes sense. So that's the biggest learning for me. And that was also the most critical. But Giuliana might have some other thoughts.
I think, well, no, you definitely touched on one of the biggest ones, and because it's one of the longest, like slow burning, how do you develop an authentic relationship as well? The other one that I guess did pop up definitely over the month of June and July is, of course, you know, access, and how can we kind of expand Active Whakapapa, because we want it to go to as many schools and sit in this place where we can offer it, the learnings, the experience to both teachers and learners alike. So then it kind of became the question of what does sustainability look like for the kaupapa as well. So it's not us as healthy families or us through Sport Waitākere or somewhere holding it as something that schools can kind of sign in and out and book for. Like that might be a short part of the solution, but what's that longer term answer to how can it sit somewhere? What does sustainability look like came up, because I think pretty much as soon as we advertised within that first week who would be interested, the appetite for it for a mix of reasons was like, okay, right, there's some meaning, there's something here. How do we deliver on what we put out to provide? So that kind of middle ground, there is still some work to do in that space of, you know, eventually in that month, June, July, we were limited by funding and time to deliver what events we could at that. So those next phases of how do we have some decision making in that space, but even further to sustainability, how do schools have access to that themselves, and community, of course. Yeah.
Akimihi. Yeah, that's awesome. And thanks, my bro. Thank you, Tuahine. Just lastly, were there any tips around where to begin when it comes to the tech side of all of this?
The tech side, like technology and stuff like that.
Find an expert.
Find an expert, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why we partnered, because I literally had no idea of how we had this concept of telling whakapapa and disseminating whakapapa. And so we were sort of thinking, oh, we'll just go the traditional route of going to a park and telling the story to whoever shows up on the day. But I also knew through previous experience or previous employment with Tūhourangi Potama, and it's a similar event, similar kind of concept to M2M. Anyone that knows M2M, which is a journey from one M to another M, and those M's could stand for marae, maunga, moana. And the idea is to travel to those between those two M's, but also to teach the stories and the whakapapa. What we learned is that if we have 50 people show up, depending on the day, but also depending on the knowledge holder, usually a kaumata or a kuia, not all 50 people can hear. So you get the first 10 that can hear, but also depending on the day, if you try and run that walk multiple times, the story changes because our kaumata and our kuia get a bit tricky. sometimes, and they change it up by 5% to make it a bit more appealing to the particular group they have it on the day, or they might snip it short because they need to get to another hui. So we really needed to find a way to deliver the kōrero on a day-by-day basis that is consistent every single time, and that every single person can experience it in its entirety, whether we have 50 or 100 people there. And so the only way we knew is to connect with specialists. Papaya Stories, they traditionally do silent discos. So this was also a very brand new thing for them, and quite scary for them as well. So they had no idea how to do what we wanted to do. They also had no idea how to run it, how to design it, but we gave it a go, and it worked. Yeah.
Ka pai, ngā mihi, mahi rangatira, echo what Whai Carol said.
Tēnā anō kōrua, ngā mihi atu ki a kōrua mō tō mahi. I better fess up early, I'm Giuliana's father. And I'm with the Ministry of Social Development, and I focus on iwi partnerships and relations. And I'd like to certainly commend you on, in my words, your connection to Te Tai Ao and what is Māori and people in general's responsibility to Te Tai Ao. I don't think we understand it as well as we should, and any opportunity that you have to reinforce our collective responsibility to Te Tai Ao, and in the context of climate change, I think you couldn't be in a better place to do that. And secondly, my question was about sustainability, and Giuliana's asked a fair bit of that, but if I were to rephrase it, I'd say, if you've been through it once, what's next? How do you keep your first audience on the hook? Kia ora.
Oh, pātai nui. Kei a koe.
It's
Giuliana can answer that.
yeah, stitch up, yeah. Okay, you tried me to keep me on my toes, haven't you? I think how do you keep the people who've experienced it once on the hook? And that actually ties in quite well with a term that Yes Ministry of Education has been using a lot in terms of curiosity. I think in terms of the system or the ways that we engage with learning, engage with our environment, engage with anything, is we've kind of not lost that curiosity or that engagement with it. We take it for what it is. We take it for granted. We take our learning, our schools, our environment just a little bit as what it is. But it's about stimulating, like connecting your mind and your heart to what you're doing, where the curiosity is, and you want to know more, you want to take in more. And then that's the next tier of that, definitely in Te Ao Māori, is then of course kaitiakitanga, where you feel a sense of responsibility for your environment, for your mahi, for what you do. So I think in part of Active Whakapapa and what we do is the way in which we share it is that it's not just like a verbatim history of something, it's engaging, it sparks questions, and it's also a learning process where, again, as some of our other educators in the room today have said, oh, well, we want to connect our learners with our local spaces. So maybe it is the questions you ask, the learning, the engagement, the actions that you can put in place that we can help design, shape, or shift practices on, that have our learners, have anyone who does it, sparking that curiosity for themselves, where it's not, it kind of becomes a nudge. No one's actively telling them to do something, but they're engaging in the behavior. I mean, there's a whole behavior profile around nudging in itself. That's some of the level to unpack. So have you got a clear-cut answer of what does that next step look like to keep them hooked? Not on the one or two sentences. Mike, you might have some other ideas.
Yeah, I also think that, and I might be starting to give away a few things here, is that with our active whakapapa, or whakapapa in general, also is the idea, as you learn your whakapapa or unpack whakapapa, you land on common ancestry. And so common ancestry also speaks about a number of our stories. So We have someone here that's working at Unitec or Wairaka. If you understand the story, when we develop that story, you'll know there's a link to Te Atatu through the naming of Te Atatu by Wairaka herself. So you start to create this common ancestry, which also means that the Wairaka kōrero speaks to the Te Atatu kōrero, that also speaks to a kōrero in Mana Whenua. So you hook them by almost creating this never-ending story where they have to go to the next kōrero to know what the next part of that kōrero is, or where that story goes, because of that common ancestry, that common kōrero that links us all. Also within Orangi Hina, you start to understand that the park is named after Princess Rangihina, which then takes you on a completely different whakapapa down Ngāti Whātua. And so you start to link all of these things, and hopefully that's another hook for our tamariki, or actually for anyone that's participating. We start to create a bucket list of walks that people have to do, because it's no good only reading half of the book. You have to read the whole thing. And so potentially we are creating a number of hīkoi that speak to each other, and that it's this ongoing whakapapa that you learn. That's just another whakaaro anyway.
Ka pai tātou, thank you so much for your kōrero. We've run over time a little bit, but if you'd like to get in contact with Mike or Giuliana, you can find their contact information on the Healthy Families Waitākere website. With that said, I'll hand back to you, Mike, to whakakapi.
Ka pai. Mihi ana ki a tātou, me kara ki a tātou ki te whakakapi. Ko te tūmanako e ora tonua i atu ki a koutou, me o koutou whānau, kia pai tō koutou rā, e mihi atu ana, e mihi atu ana, e mihi atu ana. Kia ino i tātou. Tukua te wairua kia ririki ngā taumata, hei arahi a tātou mahi me tā tātou whai ngā tikanga rātou mā. Kia mau, kia ita, kia kore ai engaro, kia pupuri, kia whakamaua, kia tīna, haumi e, hui e, tāiki e. Hāpai. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora tātou.
There are a couple of comments also in the chat for you guys to have a look back on, but I've saved them. Oh, I'll meet you guys on Teams.